So, Dr. Dunn, tell me, what is ADHD exactly, and how does it affect the people that have it, plus the people who um, are close to them?
Okay, so ADHD is a cognitive neurological disability. Sometimes it's referred to as a cognitive neurobiological disability. However, the definition may change depending on who's writing it. If you look at different scholarly articles,
Hmm.
there's over, thousands of definition because it's coined differently by different individuals. But the main thing I'd like you to know is that it's cognitive, where it affects the brain. It's you think about cognition. It's neurobiological because it comes from the genetics and the genes. So it's biological inherited. Over 80% of individuals who are diagnosed with ADHD, they have genetic traits for that. In addition to that, the other 20% is environmental because people who are exposed to lead paint, who are exposed to trauma or various environmental conditions may also develop ADHD. A lot of the research now is stating that children who were born via C-section, they may also develop ADHD because they did not go through the birthing canal, and with certain pushing and motion that would have helped their brains, their frontal cortex, to be developed. That's also a causation factor for ADHD. It's not 100% proven, but there's a lot of research, there's a lot of traction in the research space in terms of that. ADHD is, a developmental disability that is always, or 90% of the time, it's diagnosed in childhood. However, there's also conversation that there's an adult onset of ADHD,
Okay.
but there is not a specific adult ADHD because it's either you have it and you were diagnosed as a child or, teenager, adolescence, or you were diagnosed later in life because once you have ADHD, it's not something that is cured. It's something that you learn to deal with throughout your life. There's a lot of different treatment options, but I'll get into that later on. But sometimes it presents at a different time, and different presentations cause someone to maybe seek a diagnosis or treatment options to deal with it. You also ask about how does it affect individuals who are diagnosed. It affects them adversely, and it can have negative repercussions. However, there's also a lot of positives towards having ADHD because, it can be seen as a superpower. A lot of people who are diagnosed with ADHD, they're really good at hyper focusing. They're the ones who can, become the best at whatever career fields they do decide to choose because they have that hyper focusing factor that most people don't. They're also able to pick up on things most neurotypical individuals don't see. It's like having a sixth sense that helps them. And just to put it out there, Einstein was diagnosed with ADHD. Michael Jordan has ADHD. So does Will Smith, Will.I.am, Paris Hilton. A lot of famous people, Simone Biles, they have ADHD. So it's not a detriment. People may look at ADHD as a negative, but there's also a lot of positive associated with ADHD. However, on the negative side of it, there's a lot of stigma attached to it, and the stigma stems from the presentation and sometimes the comorbidities because people who are diagnosed with this disability, they have a lot of executive functioning challenges. For example, things that may be commonplace and mundane to you as an individual who is neurotypical, they do not see things that way. Just daily life chores like, you live in a house, that you get up every morning, you brush your teeth, you wash your face, you do, typical things.
Yeah.
They don't do that. People with ADHD, they forget. They have a very short memory. They have a short attention span. They are sometimes unorganized, and living with individuals, it can be problematic because, say for example, you're a type A individual and your family member, your spouse, friend or whoever it is diagnosed with ADHD. They have a mess all over. However, they know where to find their things in their mess, but it's just not easy for someone who doesn't think and function the same way as they do to really, adapt and live within their space. So it does cause challenges. A lot of times people with ADHD, they end up in divorce because, the wife or the husband may not necessarily understand why their individual or their, loved one is so forgetful. They're not, meeting targets or deadlines, rising to the occasion. And it's not because they don't want to, it's because they just physically they are not able to. They need a lot of help and support in terms of, organization, because they struggle with time blindness. Say, for example, someone with ADHD decide that you and them, they're going to meet at 10 o'clock. More than likely, they will show up at, 11, 12 o'clock, and they're apologetic, but they just couldn't get their act together to get out of the house on time, or they may have lost their keys or something. So things like that is impactful for individuals with the disability, and it also impacts people who are working or, supporting them, because it's a lot of load. For example, I have a child with with ADHD, and for me as a caregiver, it takes a lot, because at that age I'm expecting certain things to be done automatically, but it's like we start over every day. Did you pack your book bag? There's list, there's charts, but there's a challenge in terms of getting him to do what he needs to do, because they need constant reminders. They need, a lot of visual clues. You need to be very patient dealing with someone with ADHD, because fussing at them can cause them to also develop anxiety, depression, and ADHD is very much a causation factor for a lot of suicidal ideations or suicides that are committed, because people feel a lot of shame. There's a lot of stigma associated with it, and they feel like they're being picked on, they're not loved. So, whoever is dealing with individuals with ADHD, my biggest advice is just to be empathetic and supportive, because it's a lot that they're carrying. It's like, they're carrying the world on their shoulders. And you, as a neurotypical individual, do not see that, because you cannot see a disability that's invisible. ADHD is also termed the invisible disability because it's in their brain. Their brains are wired differently. It's affects their executive functioning skills, and it's also because their frontal cortex is not fully developed. So someone with ADHD, say for example that individual is 20 years old, they're functioning at 2 to 3 years behind their peers. So you're dealing with an 18 to 17-year-old individual, even though they're an adult. Say, for example, you're dealing with an 18-year-old individual. You may be thinking that, you go backwards. You're dealing with someone who's 15. So executively, their biological age doesn't coincide with their level of executive functioning skills.
So, I like the superpower analogy, right? Because it reminds me of a flow state, for the ability to focus on something where time kind of dissipates, where it's, you're not really thinking about the past, you're not thinking about the future. You'd be in a conversation for 4 hours, seems like 20 minutes just went by, and you're just like super hyper focused. But when you're in that kind of state, you're able to learn more effectively because you're not distracted by anything, and you're able to retain more of that information because, again, you're not distracted by anything, and you're able to hyper focus for that entire amount of time. So if they have that naturally as an everyday occurrence, if you could tap into that properly, that would be a superpower. But, as you know, like any superhero, when they first get their powers, it does not seem like this is a beneficial thing. Like people that wake up, and they're like, oh, now I have super strength. Now they're breaking everything they touch, so until they figure out how to use their ability to impact their life in a positive way, or impact and others around them in a positive way, it's like the worst thing has happened to them. You're like, why has this happened to me? So what would be your suggestions on how do I help turn the effects of ADHD into a superpower, and then the things that are not going to go the way that it does for everyone else on a normal day-to-day basis? How do I put systems and processes in place so that I don't forget to brush my teeth, or I show up on time? What are the things that I can do to get myself to operate the way I want to on the things that aren't the superpower, and then how do I amplify the superpower?
Okay, so that's an excellent question. And since we're talking about power, I'd just like to share that knowledge is power. A lot of times individuals with ADHD, they may hear that, you have ADHD, but they too have to know what is ADHD. It's attention deficit hyperactivity disorder. So when we think about the attention, we know that it impacts focus. If it's impacting focus, they need to figure out what can they do to be more focused. So, the deficit, it's just something, it's a deficit they have because, like I said, it affects their frontal lobe cortex. Hyperactivity, that was coined by the last DSM-5. Not everyone with ADHD presents as being hyperactive. Younger children, there's a lot more hyperactivity. However, for older, individuals, maybe teenagers, adolescents, or even adults with ADHD, their hyperactivity may be seen in terms of failure to launch, or you're doing too much all at once. So you have to know that, take what you can handle. Don't, try to do 10 different projects all at once. Focus on one or two and, try to complete them with fidelity. And we know the the last D stands for disorder. So knowing what it is as an individual with the disability will help you to, harness that superpower, so to speak. Just like we talked about, having a different diagnosis, say for example cancer, diabetes or whatever, you know that if you have cancer you need to take certain treatments, and if you have diabetes you take insulin. Whatever the case may be, you treat it at the root. However, one of the main suggestions I would offer for individuals with ADHD is that they think about their body as a temple. Because the ADHD brain, though, it affects, the brain is the most important part of the body because that's where the challenge lies. That's the root per se. So you have to feed your brain and your body accordingly. And I wrote a book on the topic as well, and one of the sections deal with nutrition. So ADHD brains, they focus better when they are not stimulated or overstimulated with a lot of sugars. And a lot of the food we're eating, it's processed, and we have to be cognizant of what we're eating. So, eating more fruits, nuts, foods that have omega-3s and 6, a lot of fish, shellfish, things of that nature will help individuals' brains and bodies to be better regulated. Instead of eating, carbs, because that gives them a lot of dopamine. The dopamine addiction that comes with ADHD makes you want to eat a lot of carbs or sweets, but the more protein you can eat, the better it is for you. So think about it from a nutritional standpoint. Fruits, vegetables, and drink a lot of water, whatever is healthy, that will help to regulate your brain. Like in the mornings, you can have egg sandwich, you can have oatmeal, things that are healthy and good for you. Start your day right. Just not having anything is not good. Sodas can be a detriment. Think about you're giving your brain poison. Some of the food we eat, it's like, giving your brain kryptonite. So we have to be cognizant of what we eat. That's one of the main things I would suggest. In terms of getting organized, time management is crucial because individuals with ADHD, they have what we call time blindness. So use as many clocks as you need to. I bought a clock for my son that when we're showering, we're going to set the timer for 10 minutes. And, that's in the weekday when we have to go to school. But on the weekends, you can set it for, longer in the evenings. Give yourself, time, or use your phone, whatever it is you need, but have some mechanism where you can see the time and maybe ask someone to help you with managing your time, because it's challenging to do it by yourself to start with. And, some people also, they hire executive functioning coach that can help them with that. It may be a little bit expensive, but if you're able to, financially afford that, that's something I would highly recommend, because sometimes you need someone to guide you along. Some insurances, they do pay for occupational therapy, which teach some of these skills, especially life skills where you're getting help with daily tasks. So think about, your insurance, your budgetary needs, or your budgetary constraints, and how you could navigate things of that nature. But I think those were the questions. Did I miss any, or?
Oh no, I think you covered a lot of it, and I really like something that you said. I actually want to touch on a couple of points. When you say disorder, right, that just means that everything's not in the order.
Correct.
That it is for the majority of the people, because if the majority of the people had ADHD, then it would be the people that didn't have it that would be the disorder, right? Because it's just whoever has the majority of the thing. So seeing it that the majority of people don't understand why you're operating the way that you're operating, I think some of it is just, like you said, educating people on how this works, why it works the way it works, and how do you adjust for the outcome that you want to have. So being able to adjust for that outcome, like you said, having a clock, having these things set where you can see them that help you with that. And then eating, I think the diet thing is just so important
That's paramount.
because people with ADHD, it sounds like they're operating in a flow state naturally. They're not having to find that. That's just where they operate. When they're thinking, they're hyper focused on whatever it is that they get focused on. So if you got them into flow, in addition to the way they already think, that's a superpower. But keeping your mind there and not having you just go into complete chaos, I think has a lot to do with the food. And when I'm working with people, when we get to the diet part of, how are you, the physical part, eating foods that aren't processed, if they're over processed, it's already processed. If your body needs to process it, but it's already processed, right? That's a problem, right? Because there's certain things that happen when your body has to process whole food, right? And having those dopamine spikes, having all that sugar in your body, is a real issue, because I would think ADHD, these are like the F1. This is like the F1 racers, right? I mean, yeah, if you're putting the wrong fuel in the car, right, it's not going to run. You cannot run a race car on garbage fuel. It just won't go. It won't perform the way it's supposed to. So
Well,
you said you
actually,
wrote
it
this
will run.
book.
It will run, but it will stop. It will run for like 2 seconds, really fast, and then it just stops, crash. So, it's not one of your Dale
Start
Earnhardt.
spitting and sputtering
Yes, you're not going to win, the stand. You're not going to win any of those. It's not the Daytona
because you can't
500.
be consistent.
No. So we stay away from sugars and all the bad stuff. We're focusing on nuts. We're focusing on berries. We're focusing on proteins. When I say nuts, walnuts, peanuts, any kind of nuts you can eat. And the more berries, the better. Like for breakfast, go for a smoothie, peanuts, strawberries, blueberries, and the leafy greens, they are the best. Kale, anything you can think. Make your green blended juice. So those are really, really helpful for the brains. And I try to get as much in my son's diet as possible, and I've seen where it works dividends. And, we talk about medication. A lot of people, they're all for medication, some are not, but I am really big on the diet because, change your diet, change your life.
Yeah, I mean, even with the medication, the medication doesn't replace you having a poor diet.
No.
And you need to do as many things as you can. It's like, like you were saying, the superpower, like Superman has kryptonite. And a poor diet is the kryptonite to that superpower that you have, and getting it dialed in and getting it focused, especially if you're saying that, suicide is prevalent with this condition. You would want to avoid that at all costs. You would want to do everything that you could to keep yourself from going into depression, going into the mindsets that would, lean you towards that. So especially if you have a child with that, you would want to do everything you could to make sure that that is not something that they're having to deal with, and diet is an easy one.
Yep. And, when we talk about ADHD too, ADHD, think about a band of bad brothers. ADHD comes with a lot of comorbidities. And you said suicide, depression. Depression and anxiety, those are two of the comorbidities that are already associated with ADHD. So if you can eat foods that are going to make you more, or less susceptible to those comorbidities, it's better. Also getting a lot of vitamin D, being outside, exercise. Oh my gosh, how did I forget this? So, in addition to the diet, we're talking about the body. Exercise, exercise, exercise. Exercising and diet, those are the two best treatment options for ADHD because, when you're out and about and you're doing things that are, impactful to your body, your emotional state, think about your body as a whole. We're looking at the physical, we're looking at the mental, we're looking at the emotional. So when we're supporting all components, then those actually help to combat or circumnavigate some of the symptoms of ADHD. I'm sorry.
No, that's good. That's good. And I mean, isn't one of the things that you're wanting to do is kind of levelize where everything is, right? That you're not getting these spikes in dopamine, that you're not getting these drops from low levels of serotonin or whatever it is. You're wanting to just kind of ride in the middle. So if
Yes.
you're exercising and you're eating properly, that allows you to be here because being depressed is due a lot of the times to being confused.
Yes.
Because I see this a lot as I do business consulting. The thing that people are the most stressed, have the most anxiety about is they're not really sure maybe which product or service to focus on. They're not really sure what their avatar, should be. They thought it was one thing, now is, they think it's maybe another. So I found that life isn't hard, business isn't hard because physically these people, they have the drive to do the thing. They want to do it. The difficulty is in not knowing. It's the lack of education, it's the lack of knowledge, it's the lack of skill set that they're experiencing. Not that they're lazy. They look lazy after an amount of time goes by just because they stop, but they're stopping because they're frustrated. It's like analysis paralysis. They get stuck because they're not sure what to do, right? So that's why I love that you've written this book. And so let's talk about the book a little bit, right? So this is your book, and you said, we went a little bit over diet. So you go through the diet that they could use to manage the way that they feel and kind of what things do, what should they eat, and how should they eat it, and why they should eat it. The other things that you cover, because you've been a teacher for a couple of decades now, right? And teaching children, educating the educator, and even in government, right? So tell me, writing this book, what was the catalyst that got you to go ahead and write this book, and what are the top things that you want people to understand when they go through and read it?
Okay, that's excellent because I started out as an elementary education teacher. And I worked at one of the best schools in the county where I worked at the time. And I thought that I knew a lot. I was ESC certified, I was National Board certified, and I thought I was a bee's knees. But now, looking back at those early years, I have a lot of regrets because ignorance is no excuse. Having a certificate or certification in ESC special education doesn't make you an expert in that area because it's very generalized and I could have done a lot better helping my students who had ADHD or any other disability if I knew what the disability is and how to best serve their needs. However, fast forwarding like 10 years later, I had a son who had ADHD. And, when he was in first grade, I was getting a lot of calls. Your son is not listening. Your son is doing X, Y, and Z. And I would have expected my child to be, the perfect, well-behaved child in school. Unfortunately, he wasn't. And the way that I realized something was off was when I got him tested because he was very hyperactive. And, I would correct his behavior and he'd go back and do the same thing. So I realized that, okay, he has a diagnosis of ADHD now, so what do we do? And that's when I started my journey. So for the last almost 10 years, I have been aggressively researching everything and anything there is to know about ADHD. So I do consider myself a subject matter expert on the topic. It's like having a second dissertation, or doing a second dissertation because I have done extensive work in this field. And one of my biggest takeaways from writing this book is that I learned so much, and I would love for other educators, whether it's classroom teachers in K-12 schools, administrators, or just anyone who's in the teaching and learning realm, even in higher education spaces, to know what is ADHD and how to help learners with ADHD. Because as we started out, it's neurobiological. We talk about people who are neurodivergent. So people with ADHD and autism, they kind of, fall under the same spectrum of being neurodivergent. A lot of ADHD tendencies, they're on the spectrum as well, but they're not autistic. They are very high functioning. Sometimes you will see individuals with ADHD who have what we call Asperger's. That was a term that has been, they have, what do you call it, combine that term with a lot of the autistic traits now. So it's either you're autistic or you're ADHD, but there's some overlapping tendencies, but it's a fine line, and educators are not necessarily familiar with what this diagnosis is and how to support them. If a child or a student, adult learner, they are diagnosed as autistic, they get a lot of support. There's trainings, there's professional development, resources to help those individuals. However, ADHD, as the term suggests, it's invisible in terms of the disability, in terms of a lot of the support. So my main mission for writing this book is to get the word out. I will talk to anybody and everybody about ADHD because, I have a lot of regrets. If I had known about it, I would have done better. But, not knowing, you can't do better. And especially for my son, I am an advocate for him. I will go, to the ends of the earth to ensure that he gets the best education because, I know the education system, but there's a lot of parents, caregivers who are not familiar, even people with ADHD who are not familiar with the education laws or policies, resources, and support that are available to them. So I write this book, and there's a lot in terms of the laws because when you're diagnosed with ADHD, you can get either a 504 plan, and that's part of the Rehabilitation Act of 1973. And if you have a 504 plan, that's something that you can take from kindergarten straight to college with you in the educational system. However, if you have an IEP, and it depends on your diagnosis, you're only getting support in the K-12 schools, but if you're going to college and higher education institutions, you'll have to, advocate for your needs within that space. So my main mission, going back to the book, was to educate, educate, educate. And it was also a passion project because I wanted to know how to help my son. And like now, I am very fierce. When it comes to my son, he gets everything and anything because I know the laws, I know what to do and how to support him. And it started out with him, but now it's not just about him because I realized that there's a need. There is such a great need for knowledge and advocacy for these individuals with the disability. So, like I said, the book is here for anyone who wants to read it, and I'm also here to support as well.
Perfect, perfect. So a couple of things that makes me think about it. So yeah, I love this conversation. One of the things that I'm interested in is what was the gap as you have this son, you find out that he has this disorder, and obviously you start reading books, you start looking around, how do I help him? What was the gap that you saw that you said, this is why I need to write this book. This is why I need to educate people on it. I mean, because, when I hear somebody has ADHD, basically, it's not something that we talk about. It's something that's said a lot, but it's not something that's explained a lot. So you hear it and you say, oh, well, they got way too much energy. It's like a kid on 15 Red Bulls, right? That's just what you think, but you don't understand anything past that. So there's obviously a gap that you had to fill. What is that gap, and what would you want to say to someone who may be listening that has ADHD so that they're not looking at this as a negative? How can they look at it as a positive, and how could the people like maybe the educators and the parents look at it in a way that, hey, someone like this, these are the things that they can do that are above and beyond what a normal person can do. And if you will start focusing on that, it focuses on the positive instead of the negative.
Well, starting with the gap, I realized there were lots of books about ADHD, but the presentation of the topics were not as comprehensive. You know, you look at books and you have some books that are very kiddie-like where, oh, this is ADHD and, you know, you're hyperactive and this is what you're supposed to do. Then you'd have some other journal articles, but it was not a lot of comprehensive information. So I wanted to put everything in one place because in my book, there are 12 chapters. You know, I started out with the whole etiology of ADHD, going back to the Bible. You know, ADHD is nothing new. It has been around since, you know, the Bible days. It's, you know, if you talk about I can't even say the name, but it's the first physician back in the Greek age.
Hippocrates?
Hippocrates, thank you. So, you know, he is even one of them who talked about ADHD, but people don't look into that. You know, we're going back into the 1500s. Okay. That's how long ago ADHD has been around. But we have never really given it a name. We've never really paid attention to it. So it's not a new disability. People are looking at it like, oh, it's just in the 1980s and 1990s, and it's something to do with the pharmaceutical companies. No. I went all the way back, and if you have a cut and you're trying to get it cured, you don't put a Band-Aid on it. And a lot of what I saw, they were just Band-Aid stopgap measures. So I went back, I uncovered the wound, I debriefed it, and I'm getting all the information out. So knowing what it is, that's where we start. I went to ground zero and explain it, because chapter 1 and the introduction of the book is very robust. A child can understand it, an educator can understand it, a parent or a stakeholder, anyone can understand it. In addition to that, the book is full of graphics because, there are a lot of visual learners. So, when you think about ADHD, think about an iceberg. You see the top. And, you just see X, Y, and Z at the top, but you're not seeing the rest of the alphabet. All 23 letters, they're under there. That's what someone with ADHD or their caregiver is dealing with. So I, made sure I explained a lot of that. In addition to that, I talked about a lot of the causation factors. I know earlier I gave you some of the causation factors, but that's just scratching the surface as well. So, it talks about the causation factors. We talked about the different characteristics, because most people hear ADHD, they're thinking about hyperactivity. It's not only hyperactivity, it presents differently in males than in females. It presents differently in children than in adolescents and teenagers and even in adults. So, looking at the different characteristics, we also look at the different comorbidities that are associated with ADHD, because we talked about, anxiety and depression. Those are two of them that are always, coming as top ones, but we also have ODD, which is oppositional defiant disorder. Those are some of the comorbidities that we need to look at, because if we're treating ADHD and we're not also treating the comorbidities, we may not necessarily get results. So the book presents a lot of these different information. I also wrote about how to be successful in schools, because that's one of the areas that most people struggle with, whether it's in a elementary school, a middle school, or a high school. Even in the military environment, people are struggling with ADHD, especially if they're not on medication, because some people don't want others to know that they are on medication. Some people don't take medication for a variety of reasons, but there are strategies to help them to be successful. Teachers in general, they do not always read a student's file to know that they have ADHD. So if they don't read the file, they don't know. And some of the teachers, people are coming from different fields. They were not necessarily, teacher education individuals, so they don't necessarily know about ESC or a lot of the disabilities in the courses they're taking, the crash courses to become teachers. So I provide a lot of information on how to support students. There's a plethora of accommodations, how to help these individuals in school. And I'm not going to say just children, because the accommodations, they run the whole gamut of education, whether it's in K-12, higher education, or even in, vocational schools, because it's not just in the traditional classroom that the accommodations can be provided. I also provide a lot of information about educating the adult learner, because this is not just about people who are in the school setting. Someone like you may need to learn more about, helping a person with ADHD. Say, for example, you have a client who has ADHD. You need to know how to, help that person to learn how to navigate life in general, and just a lot of things, because even spouses, helping their spouses to support, to navigate ADHD is so paramount, because like I said earlier, when we don't have that knowledge, it can go south where there's divorce, there's problems in the family. So even grandparents, parents, grandparents, they like to give candies and sweets and like, oh, let's do this. No, if you love someone so much, you can't love them to be giving them poison. So if you love your grandchild, try to give them, vegetable instead of giving them candy. Or, help the parents to pay for tutoring and extra support, because individuals with ADHD, it takes them a lot longer to learn certain skills, especially if it's not their preferred skill. So, the parents may need financial support. In addition to financial support, they may also need, just your time, because it can be a lot for parents, especially those who are single parents too. They may just need a break, a mental break. So individuals who are supporting people with ADHD, sometimes your time is one of the best gifts you can give them. I also spoke a lot about, sleeping as well. I spoke about exercise and dieting earlier, but sleeping is paramount, because the ADHD brain is like it's on steroids. So it takes a long time for someone with the diagnosis to fall asleep. So maybe, starting to shut down an hour or two earlier. A lot of individuals, whether they have ADHD or not, you hear that they should turn off their technology an hour to two before they start to fall asleep. For the ADHD individuals, it's the same. You may need to think about giving them, chamomile tea, melatonin, or magnesium, or different things that will help them to start calming down and falling asleep in the night. Normally, an adult will need about 8 hours of sleep. And someone with ADHD, they may need 10 to 12 to 14 hours of sleep per day, because that's how much time it takes for their brains to recharge. Because, think about that race car. It's just going, 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 and it never stops for gas. It can be problematic. That's where we have burnout and problem. That's where a lot of the anger and the outbursts comes, when they're not regulated. And sleep is what really helps to regulate the brain. I spoke a lot about treatment options, and this is very, personal, because some people are very apt to take prescribed stimulant medication. Some people are more for non-stimulant medication. It doesn't matter, your choice, that's personal. However, some people, they take a combination of stimulants and non-stimulants. Stimulant and behavior therapy or occupational therapy. And some people, they just medicate with food or, different homeopathic remedies. So there's a whole section here that talks about treatment option. And I am not a medical professional, so that would be something that you would speak to your medical professional about. But there's a lot of information that you can learn about possible treatment options, because, some people may just want to get the person regulated quickly and not have some of the behaviors, and that will work. But one thing I want to tell you, though, whatever you decide to choose, it takes time for you to get it right, because it's not something that's going to happen overnight. It's not like a snap of the finger or a magic bullet. So you will need to have some time and patience to dedicate to this. And like I said earlier, food promotes better cognition and supports the ADHD brain. The book also has a plethora of resources and strategies that will help you to thrive and survive. So, I spoke about different local organizations, national organizations. There's a lot of websites, there's a lot of YouTube channels. It's like resources galore that will help you, whatever your needs are or your family needs, to be successful. And one of the things I want to talk to you about with the book is that it's not just a factual nonfiction book. I interviewed a lot of individuals and I had them write their story. I made sure that I didn't do the normal interview where you're doing an interview and you're transcribing someone's words. What I did, I asked individuals to write about their experience with ADHD, so that it's authentic. If you see any mechanical, grammatical errors, I do apologize about that, because I did not want to alter their words. I wanted it to be very authentic. So, I have MDs, medical doctors who are psychiatrists. I have social workers, I have parents, I have educators, you name it, ESC specialists. They have also contributed to this work as well because I wanted their authentic story. I have a lot of adult learners who shared their experience, doctoral students. I had military professionals write their work in here. So the only persons who did not share their work was anyone who, or, their experience rather, was anyone who was under 18 years old because, with different laws and policies, I didn't want to get any minors information written because it would be published. So everyone gave consent and they were okay with me sharing their stories. However, I did not share their names or any identifying information just for privacy policies. But these are real authentic stories that are written in here as well.
That's excellent. And I do want to touch on one of the things you said, which was making sure that you're getting enough sleep, and stopping using digital devices and whatnot like that. One of the things that is so interesting to me when someone comes and they say, well, one of the issues that I'm having is energy. And I say, okay, well, what is your sleep like? And if they are getting 8 hours of sleep, let's say, what is the quality of the sleep that you have? Like, are you getting into REM sleep? Do you know what that is? Do you feel rested when you wake up? And if the answer is no, almost inevitably, they either watch TV before they go to sleep or use their phone all the way up until they just can't focus on it anymore, and they eat before they go to bed, which makes absolutely no sense. But, anytime I've shared this with somebody, they're like, wow, I never really thought about that. But when you eat, you're putting your body to work. As soon as you finish eating, as you're eating, now your body has to digest. You're waking your entire body up to digest and do the whole process that has to happen once you eat. And then you're going to go lay down, which makes, that's crazy. That's crazy. Like, I'm going to go to sleep. I want to go rest, but I just woke all of the inside of my body up. Right. And I would assume that's way worse. And not only are they eating and waking their body up to digestion, they're usually eating the worst food because, they've already eaten dinner. This is snacks, and snacks usually consist of sugar and Cheetos and popcorn and, just butter and a whole bunch of stuff that they shouldn't be eating anyway. And this is way worse for people that have this condition.
Oh yeah, definitely. One of the things too with ADHD, people with ADHD, they're normally very impulsive. So this is where family members and friends, loved ones, spouses, significant others come in. You are going to have to be the police of them, so to speak, where you're saying, hey, listen, it's 8 o'clock now. I don't think we should eat anything else for the night. Let's brush our teeth and just relax. Lay in your bed. You don't have to be doing anything because if you're going to be eating something at 8 o'clock at night, it may take you 2-3 hours for your body to digest that food. And like you're saying, it's working. We don't need to do that. The impulsivity too, sometimes we're not even hungry. Oh, I just saw that Cheetos. Let me go grab that Cheetos. Let me grab some popcorn. Let me just have a late night snack.
It's more habit
or ice cream. Yeah, we don't need it. So it's habitual, but it's also, the brain telling you. So it's a fight. Being someone diagnosed with ADHD and, doing what is right, it's very hard. And sometimes people with ADHD, they develop diabetes, hypertension, high blood pressure because they're eating a lot of the things that are not best for them. Like, I know someone who likes bacon and ham, and the amount of salt that's on there, but you have to regulate, help them like, hey, you had bacon yesterday. Let's try to have something else for breakfast tomorrow. Let's have the egg today, because they will eat whatever it is there because they can't control themselves. So we have to help them to control. We have to help them to regulate because executive functioning skills is not as paramount as we would have expected it to be. And remember, like I said earlier, don't think that the biological age would allow them to do the things that you're expecting them to do, because my 14-year-old, he doesn't do a lot of the things I expect a 14-year-old to do. But then a lot of times I have to remind myself, listen, he's functioning at 10, 11 years old because they're, 3 to 4 years behind their peers. Some things, oh, he's a teenager. He will let me know he's a teenager. But other things, I'm like, yeah, I have to help you with this, that, or the other. So even if you have someone who's 25 years old, think about them as a 21-year-old. So we have to give grace, and we still have to be patient and get outside professional help if you need it, because some things you try to do on your own and you cannot. And just to maintain family relationships and order, it's better to solicit help. I can tutor my child in just about any subject, but I choose not to, so we can have a good relationship. Because oh, you're picking on me. Why you're being so hard on me? But the same thing the tutor will say, or the teacher, or someone else outside. Oh yeah, now I understand, or I learn it. But
it lands different.
It lands a lot differently. So solicit outside help as much as you can, and do the best you can, and also just give yourself grace, because as family members, it's a load. And oh, I have to tell you this. One other thing I wrote about in the book is self-care for the caregiver, because it's a very daunting, overwhelming task. You're managing yourself, but you have to manage someone else who's supposed to be able to manage themselves. So you have to give yourself grace and find time for you as a caregiver, and do something, because sometimes you get so caught up where you forget that you're a person too, taking care of the other individual.
Oh, that's beautiful. I think that's very important for anyone helping anyone else
Yes.
with that has any condition or is in any situation that is not normal for that person, right? So the question I have, because we've went over a lot of things. We went over the book, all the things that you cover in the book, what ADHD is, how it affects the people who have it, how it affects those around them, what are some of the options that they have to be able to utilize the things that are the positives they have and turn that into a real superpower, and then the things that are making it a little bit of a struggle, how to make some adjustments for that. So if we take all that, now that you've written this book and you've seen the things that are out there, what within the next couple of years would you like to see happen in, say, the community for people who have this and those who are taking care of those who have this disorder, so that they can maximize the experience? So it's not a negative experience. It's not, what would you say you would love to see happen?
What I'd love to see happen is more education. Say, for example, in the school systems, I want to see more training. There needs to be a lot more professional development for teachers. Ignorance is not an excuse. And when I say teachers, I mean administrators too, because a lot of administrators, they do not know what ADHD is. And, because of their lack of knowledge, they do not necessarily provide the funding and the support. And when I'm saying administrators, I don't just mean building level administrators like principal. I'm talking at the national level, because if we look at it from the national level, the state level, the school board level, then it will trickle down to the schools, the principals. So, I want it to be a movement per se. Back in the late 80s when we were talking about AIDS and HIV, there was a lot of stigma and, someone have AIDS, I can't touch them. I will catch it automatically. I think we're at that same level with ADHD where, they have ADHD, they're just crazy, they're hyperactive, they're lazy, all the different negative terms we will associate with ADHD. I would like to demystify the myth. Let's be a myth buster and get to understand what ADHD is. So it starts with education. Once we know what ADHD is, look at the positives, because if you see someone with ADHD as a whole person, a person who's, valued, loved, respected, you can see them in a different light. I don't know about you, but I really like Will Smith. And I think that, because he doesn't walk around with ADHD printed on his forehead and he's so accomplished, people don't see his ADHD. They see him as an actor, a person who's a celebrity. I want people to see ADHD as something that is associated with celebrities, athletes, top
Associated with
athletes,
high performers.
high performers, because like I'm saying, come on now, we're talking about Einstein. You don't get any smarter than Einstein, and he
Yeah.
is associated with ADHD. You think about Simone Biles, the gymnast. She's so accomplished, but she has ADHD, and Paris Hilton, so beautiful. So it's not that you have to be ugly or short or anything like that to have ADHD. Just about anybody and everybody in every walks of life, they have ADHD. So, they even, I think it was Justin Timberlake. Oh my gosh. In the book, I wrote like a whole list of individuals with ADHD. I can't remember their names now. Like even the guy for Virgin Atlantic, Bronson, Bill Gates, even rich people has ADHD. So, it's just.
I would think they would. I would think that would be a thing. So, that goes back to what you were saying, even the diet, the exercise, the sleep, all the things that would allow you to be able to take this and function in a way that you could set goals and achieve goals. Because again, these people are being able to drop into a flow state and hyper focus on a daily basis. It's just, can they stay there? And if they can stay there, then they can achieve, being movie stars, being top athletes, all kinds of things like that. So it's being able to help them see themselves having a superpower and helping those who are assisting them seeing that also, and then how do we develop that as opposed to just seeing it as a negative. So with you being an educator yourself, what are the first steps that we can take to start helping people at that level that you're talking about? Like how can we get something going to help people break the stigma and to help them be educated on what it is so that we can give these individuals the assistance that they need?
Well, they said money makes the mirror run. So I would, suggest that we start looking at it in terms of legislatures, because I know we're dismantling the Department of Education, but whichever department is handling this now, if we start providing funding for it at that national level, that would be one place to start. But a better place to start would be to read this book.
Right.
No, I am
Absolutely.
serious. If, like I said, education is power. Read this book and, start getting educated. Educate yourself, because if you know something, you can start talking about it. So if you read this book, then you will, this will be at least ground zero from where you can launch. And reach out to me, because I would be happy to share this knowledge that I have gathered with just about anyone. I am a big advocate and supporter for individuals with ADHD. If you look at autism and you see that, it started with a movement where people, started pushing for their children to get help. When we look at special needs back, I don't remember when it was, but I remember I saw something where they were on the steps of the White House pushing for people with disability to get support. And we need to start advocating, going to DC, going to Tallahassee, going to our different state capitals to ensure that people are hearing, that ADHD individuals are here, they need help, they can be successful. Because it's very disheartening to know that there are children in schools that are not getting the support they need because nobody knows they have ADHD. Additionally, their parents don't know how to advocate for them. And a lot of times these individuals with ADHD, they get bullied, they get yelled at, whether it's in school, home, or different areas, because they do not function well in a neurotypical world with their neurodivergency, but because they're not in a wheelchair or they do not have a physical disability, we do not see that they are struggling. You can't see someone's brain, so you don't know that their brain is not functioning like it is supposed to. Sure. And that's part of the challenge I'm having. So, having the word out is, I think that's the catalyst for change here.
Well, and that makes me think about how funding works. A lot of times, I deal with a lot of nonprofits and we do a lot of events. And just looking at it from a business perspective, it's like, okay, what value could we bring to the table that would make sense to invest into this particular project? And a lot of times that's just the way you have to look at it to get people to move. So if you say, okay, well, these people have a superpower that's untapped, and if we built some kind of education, some kind of system, some kind of plan for them to be able to maximize the superpower that they've got, what could they do? Like, think about how much, they hyper focus, and we struggle to even just focus, not hyper focus, right? So, a person that has the ability to do something that the majority of us struggle to even get a glimpse of, what would that look like if it were channeled? And when you can start looking at it through that lens, it's like, oh, well, I see the value in that. And a lot of times it's just seeing the value in something that allows people to invest in making the framework happen. So I think if we could look at it maybe from that perspective, instead of just saying, these people have a disability and you should take care of them because, they're less fortunate. It's like, well, I mean, yes, in some area, but they're actually have an untapped superpower that could help us as a society, that could help, the community as a whole. And if we start looking at it like that, well, maybe that's something that we invest in because we're going to get dividends out of it.
Okay, so I'm going to read a section from the book for you. And when I call these names, I want you, the listening audience, to think about the contribution these individuals have made. So some of the famous people who have been diagnosed with ADHD and contributed to society are Vincent van Gogh, Mozart, Alexander Graham Bell, Abraham Lincoln, Thomas Edison, Michael Phelps, Michael Jordan, Justin Timberlake, Adam Levine, Simone Biles, Paris Hilton, Ty Pennington, Will I Am, Howie Mandel, Bill Gates, David Needleman, Richard Branson, John F. Kennedy, Albert Einstein, to name a few. This list is exhaustive, and there are several others such as Jim Carrey, Lisa Lang, Ryan Gosling, Walt Disney, Channing Tatum, Johnny Depp, Zayn Malik, Justin Gatlin, and even Anna in the movie Frozen. So you're talking about dividends and contribution to society. Would we have someone else who can create something as wonderful as Disney World? What did Alexander Graham Bell create? What is it that we need in the world that someone with ADHD can create? We're still looking for the cure for cancer. If they can hyper-focus well enough, it could be someone with ADHD who will create the cure for cancer. We're trying to prevent, a lot of global warming effects and, protecting our ozone. These individuals, they're really good in the field of science. My son, per se, he's like a genius. You don't always see the geniusness coming out, but when it comes to science, he will hone in on a topic and he will, really get some answers. Now
they just don't let go of it.
No, he doesn't let go. And now he's doing mitosis and meiosis and all those stuff in biology. And every morning he's letting me, with a PhD, know how inept I am because he knows X, Y, and Z. And he will go down a rabbit hole with me and he will prove that he's right. So, if they hyper-focus on something, they will be the best at whatever they do. And if you hire someone with ADHD, that may be one of your best employee, you'll ever have, because they're going to be the one who will see everything. A lot of them are in the field of accounting because they're really good with math, if that's their strong area. And one person told me that, oh, the company was losing millions of dollars, but I figured out X, Y, and Z, and I could have, backtrack and, did a lot of processes that were costing us money, and we could also, recoup money. So they can help organizations, they can help individuals, they can help society in a whole. One of the things I want to bring up that's a little bit on the negative, a lot of these school shootings that we're having, I promise you, if we look at these mental health challenges that the students are facing and we really address them more holistically, that will also prevent, a lot of the school shootings we're having. We don't want to send our children to school and worry, are they coming home to us tonight? If you look back even at the Parkland school shooter, 2018 Valentine's Day, I am looking at it from a mental health perspective, and that kid needed help. Mm-hmm. The school system did not see that he needed help. Maybe the individuals in his life didn't see that he needed help, but it's situations like these, when we provide help for them, we're taking away the the anxiety. We're helping to mitigate against the depression. So intervening early, providing more support. I realize we're very reactive instead of proactive. You know, someone gets killed in a school shooting or wherever, even if it's a mall, oh, our thoughts and prayers are with you. What is that going to do? You know, the person is already dead, because most times the shooter kills themselves, but the family is left grieving. You know, my heart is so raw for those parents in Parkland. They send their children to school and they came back. And I know they're very strong advocates, but then we're going to say our thoughts and prayers are with them. What did we do to help that kid, you know, so that he didn't have to go take up a AK-47 or whatever rifle it was and, you know, kill innocent people? So we need to be more proactive in terms of realizing that ADHD is a mental health challenge. It's invisible. It's, you know, that movie, I forgot, Encanto, where we think about under the surface. ADHD is like a volcano waiting to erupt. You see a lot of people walking around angry. People with ADHD, when they don't know how to communicate or get their points across, they're very angry. I dealt with a lot of anger issues with my son, but we've gone to a lot of therapy since he was 6 years old. And one of the therapists, Miss Dana up in Colorado, I'll never forget her. She taught my son to name it, tame it, and reframe it. What is it that is bothering you? So we're going to name it. Let's tame it. How can we, you know, look at the situation holistically to help it, and we're going to reframe it. Let's look at it from a positive light, because when they're walking around not knowing how to communicate, not having the persons to communicate with, it brings a challenge. So, you know, that would be some benefits to society, helping the individuals learn to communicate and, you know, be productive citizens where they can help. Because guess what, we spend a lot of money on social services and we're waiting till the horse has been through the gate before we're trying to catch it back. And if we can do more in K-12 schools and address these, I'm an advocate for students, and I was in a conference with a teacher yesterday. And I was very deterred because the teacher had the nerve to tell me she's been teaching for 28 years and, you know, the child doesn't have an IEP, so there's nothing she can do to help them. As a teacher, as a professional, you need to find the way to help the child. And I told her, I said, hey, why don't you speak to the guidance counselor and the school psychologist? And she told me that, oh, well, you know, in January, we're in November now, and the wait game, that's one of the biggest challenge, because while you're waiting for support and you're not intervening because you don't have the knowledge or the wherewithal, then the child is getting further. You know, it's like someone is sick and you're waiting for the doctor. Think about back in the Stone Ages where, you know, there was one doctor in the neighborhood and you're waiting for the person to come. Go back to the Bible. Remember when, you know, that rich man's daughter was dying and they had to wait for Jesus to come? The kid died, or I think it was Lazarus who died before Jesus came. So we're waiting and we're waiting, and only God knows what we're waiting on sometimes for that, you know, help to come. While we're waiting, if we're educated, we can start performing CPR. Perform CPR till the bigger help comes from outside.
Yeah, so what you're saying, I think what I'm hearing anyway is like, if we could have systems in place to diagnose, if there's something that seems off or is not in line with the way that the majority of the people are operating, right, that's creating harmony and it's creating disharmony, then we address it and see, okay, what is the problem? And now, is there an infrastructure to positively move this over into helping the individuals grow and expand to their potential, you know, whatever the situation is. And looking at ADHD not as something that, oh, there's one more thing that's a problem that we need to fund that we're not going to get any returns on. It's just we're having to help these individuals because they can't help themselves, and it's just money that we're going to have to do because it's, you know, part of society. Not looking at it from that angle. Say, now if we can diagnose this person has this, and now there's an infrastructure that helps them to expand into their potential, because like you were saying, there's so many famous people that are athletes, that are entrepreneurs, that are inventors,
Yep.
movie stars, singers, and probably, I would guess, a lot of their ability to rise to that height had to do with not their disorder, but the superpower that comes from being able to hyper focus,
Yep.
because that's, you know, one of the things that comes with ADHD. So if we had the frameworks in place to help these people, and that's immediately where they went, imagine the ground that we could cover in so many fields.
Oh
You know,
yeah.
so I love what you're doing. So I think we could talk about this, you know, for a long time. But yeah, so if someone's wanting to get your book, so that they can understand if they have a child with it, if they think they may have a child with it, if they know they have it, and, you know, where can they get your book?
Okay, so the book is on Amazon. It's also on Ingram
And
Sparks.
can you show them the book?
Oh yeah. So it's on Amazon, Ingram Sparks, and it's on Lulu.com. It's also at Barnes and Nobles because I've put it on a lot of platforms, and it's available locally too. I sell them if anyone wants to buy a copy.
And say the name of the book?
It's Understanding ADHD Together, a guide for educators, families, friends, and learners of all ages. And, you know, I like to autograph copies and, you know, sell to individuals. So, you know, if anyone is in the local area, then I can always, you know, get it to them. And those are some of the outlets that the book is on. But most
Okay.
people are buying from Amazon or Ingram Sparks. They just started buying from Barnes and Nobles because that was one of the last ones that I, you know, uploaded it to.
Excellent. And where can people reach you? Like, where are the social platforms they can reach you, and do you have a website that people can go to?
Yes, I have a website, and it's A to Z or A-Z educationalsolutions.com. You can reach me via that platform. You can call me at 954-240-6980. I am on social media, but I'm not big on social media, but I am on Facebook at Shernette Dunn. And I think that's most of the places, you know. You can, the best way to reach me, though, is via the website or via telephone.
Okay. And then are there resources on your website or other places, resources that people could go to help start moving this forward?
Well, because my website is mostly based on my education consulting practice, the resources there would be more beneficial to anyone looking for educational support. So if, you know, they need resources, the best place to get those resources would be to get the book, because the book provides a plethora of resources. But, you know, like I gave you my number, 954-240-6980. I also have a lot of other resources that I could package and send out to other individuals, because what I'm trying to do now is to develop a curriculum teaching others about ADHD, because, you know, since the book came out, others are asking, you know, are you doing workshops? You know, can you provide information that we could use for others to help them to learn about it? So that's something that's in the works, but I'm happy to create and provide, you know, because different organizations, they have different needs. So
Sure.
I can provide and tailor it to individuals' needs.
So now currently, if someone's wanting to work with you, what are the things that you could provide in ways of workshops and ways of whatever it is that they might need that you currently do that you would like to let them know about? So if they're saying, oh, you know, I would like to work with you, you know, they know how to get a hold of you now. What is it that they could expect to have you present?
Well, again, it goes back to what the individual would like, because I'm very diverse when it comes to education. I've been in the field
Sure.
for over 25 years. I can work with individuals in terms of developing curriculum. I can work with them in terms of providing training for their organization, or whether it's, you know, professional development for teachers, because that's one of the fields that I think that needs it the most for educating the educators. And I can also provide, you know, speaking engagements per se, because sometimes it's just starting with what is ADHD, and we can also talk about why is it important. I'm a very big proponent of Simon Sinek's book, Start With Why. Like you're asking, you know, why is it that we need to pay attention to ADHD? Why is it, you know, important that if we provide funding that we can help others? So I can provide different resources based on the needs of the individual, but the most things that I do provide is speaking engagements. I provide curriculum or workshops, and a lot of the speaking engagements, they're either virtually or in person, depending on the time. So, you know, I do a lot of Zoom meetings, and sometimes just, you know, based on individual needs. If, say, for example, a university's department, Office of Student with Disabilities, they need, you know, for their staff to be trained, I can also provide training in terms of that organization, or community events as well, because sometimes, there's different mental health professionals who are hosting events in the community and they need someone to support them. And anything to do with educating the students with ADHD, that's one area that I am really big on supporting, because whether it's parents or just even the students themselves, because sometimes the way that they're taught is not the way they're able to learn. I can help them to learn math through a lot of hands-on, kinesthetic activities. I can help them to learn reading through fun, drama, depending on what it is their needs are, because we're talking about how their brains are wired, and if you're teaching them the conventional way, that may not be their best modes of learning. So, finding those ways that are best suited for the individual. So again, it goes back to preference and needs.
That's excellent. So right now you're in South Florida, but you're going to be moving to Alabama. But I'm sure you'd be willing to, you say you used to travel all the time,
Yes,
right?
I
So
will be
you'd be
by
willing to travel.
state because, I will be there for work sometimes and I'll be here, because I will not, I will have two home states now. And I do a lot of consulting. So, I'm not location bound because a lot of my clients are on the Northeast, and some of them are back to Colorado or, even in the Pacific Coast. So I work different time zones and different locations. So I am flexible as long as we can communicate and coordinate. I am available. This is a passion project. So when it comes to ADHD, if you call me at 12 at nights, I will respond because I want people to learn about ADHD. Having a child with ADHD, it makes it a little bit more personal for me. And I have seen a lot of what he has gone through. And if I can prevent some of those challenges for others, I will do whatever I can to ensure that people don't have to go through a lot of the stigmas, the challenges, and also what I have gone through. I have a story, I have a testimony, and I can help other teachers, I can help other parents to navigate this. And from a researcher's standpoint, I can help other researchers to go down certain rabbit holes with the topic or not. And even when we're talking about technology, there are a lot of technologies and tools that are out there to help individuals, even though we don't want them to watch or use it when they're going to sleep. What are some of the resources that are available? So, reach out to me and I'll be happy to share my knowledge. It's been, 10 years in the making, so I have a lot to spill.
Yeah, you're excited. You're excited to share, and I love that. Right.
Yeah.
So please, reach out to Dr. Dunn. Everything will be in the description below. All her contact information, different ways to reach her, and a link to the book. Don't forget to get the book. And so thank you so much, Dr. Dunn, for being on the show.
Oh, you're very welcome.
And,
It was my pleasure. Thank you for having me.
Yeah, absolutely. And I look forward to having you back after a little bit of time has passed so we can see what you've done and what some of the programs are that are helping everyone.
I'm looking forward to it as well.
All right,
Thank
you
you.
so much.